Hey guys, welcome, and I'm just going to do a short overview of our final project so we can make sure you guys get the maximum number of points, okay? Um, I think this project is worth 400 points, so that means it's worth 40% of your grade. So it is an important um, paper and deserves your utmost attention and details. So we want to make sure that you do an exceptional job. So I want to just go over and touch upon a few things as you begin working on your paper and or preparing for your interviews. So let's just quickly go over the main elements here for this paper. And remember, we've already had you submit who you're going to interview, so I think we're on good track there. Some of them you guys may have had to rethink that, but based on your second submissions, it looks like we're good. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. The key thing I want you to look at here regarding the selection of your municipal official is that for confidentiality purposes, the names and employer of the individuals not to be disclosed. However, the job title should be noted. So take that into consideration as you begin to work on your paper. So we don't need names and we don't need employers. You can just say they're a municipal employee. If you want to say we have a city of 100,000 people, that would be fine. Or an administrator at the county level or something like that. So we just don't need to know their name and employer. Okay, so keep that in mind, but please use the job title because that's going to be important as you further define their duties and responsibilities and an array of other things that we have to keep in mind. All right. The other thing is, remember the interview consent form. You can send it to them in an email attachment, and they can sign it and fax it to you, or do an e-signature or something like that. And I talked about that before in a previous announcement. And that form can be adapted. In other words, you can click on a spot and put in information. So make sure you do that as you prepare. And if you want, you can just attach it as a separate document to your paper, or you can include it in your paper if you can download it that way. But just make sure that we have a copy of it in case that's needed. All right, and that's required now for interviews at the college level. Identification of topics to be investigated. I offered you some feedback this week on those assignments. I think the critical issue here is you can ask general questions, which are important because we need to get an understanding of the person's position and so forth. But you also need to make sure that there's some critical thinking involved in your analysis here. And so that may require you to ask deeper type of questions or tie important concepts and ideas that we've learned throughout the course into your interviews as you're discussing this person's job and his role within this particular local government. And all I'm looking at here, for example, is I've gone back and looked over all of our topics that we've had, and we've talked about governance structure, which is the council manager or the strong mayor or the weak mayor. Surely that could be something you might want to ask about and get their perspective on that. We've looked at the various departments within a local government, and we've asked ourselves which are more important than the other. Maybe your particular individual has some ideas on that. You can formulate some critical ideas based on that. We've talked about fiscal challenges. So figure out how this topic relates to your particular person and his or her role. What are some of the physical challenges? Maybe you need to understand how they obtain their revenue in whatever municipal government they work for. And oftentimes you'll find that more than one share is significant. So understanding that and the consequences of if that revenue flow is disrupted is important. So you can focus maybe on some of those fiscal challenges. One of the things I want to make sure you do pay attention to is the idea of the focus on citizens' role in local government. So as you're talking to your person, you might go back and look at some of the specific assignments you've worked on regarding citizen participation. So you can ask, for example, what level do you have citizen participation? Do they just show up at council meetings, or does their particular organization actually have more in-depth citizen involvement, where they're involved in maybe some um, administrative decision-making processes, maybe a planning commission or a police commission or review commission or whatever the case is, or a library board. So really get into this idea about what's their level of citizen participation at the local level. Tied with that, you can address the demographic issue, which can be related to personnel. For example, if the person you interview works for a municipality that has a heavy Chinese population, what have they done to take steps to hire Chinese as part of their organization, police department, fire department, or whatever the case is, even their particular organization. Because I think that's going to be important, because a lot of cities try to mirror their community, and that makes sense. So those are the kind of issues you can look at. You can find out if they're a home rule city, or I'm sorry, you can find out, hold on just a second. All right, sorry guys, I've been trying to get over this cold. So you can ask about the home rule, whether or not they are a charter city or home rule city, benefits, drawbacks, pros, cons, something along those lines. See if you can tie it into something like that. We already talked about the demographic issue, attracting new employees and challenges that they face in general. So the other thing, just closing with the identification topics, and so just to make sure that you can ask your general questions, but again, we're looking at those subtle nuances that show that you have a solid understanding of the course content material that we've been talking about. So critical thinking issues. So try to delve into those questions as well, so you can tie this all together and hopefully be able to see how fiscal challenges impact different departments within a city, and how the city resolves who gets what share of the money. So those kind of things. Okay. Results and data analysis. So analyze the data that you collected during your interview, including evaluation of the challenges that face the official, as well as critique of the constraints and benefits of the municipal official's position. Some of those, of course, could be financial constraints, could be personnel constraints. The analysis should address the function and impact the official has on local services. It may be helpful to compare the results with the previous work that you submitted during the course of the semester, discussion topics, short papers, and so forth. So again, you're trying to tie in some of the data, some of the results that they're telling you, maybe this idea about home rule. So maybe you're interviewing somebody who does not have, does not have home rule, but is a sort of a charter city or general law city, and maybe they have data or ideas to share with you, and then you can look at that based on your previous assignments. So again, I don't want you guys reinventing the wheel, because you don't have to, but we've talked about a lot of critical areas of municipal government, and those are the kind of things hopefully you can tie in with your interview, so you can walk away with a better understanding as to how these topics actually apply into the real world. All right, so this idea of analyzing data, looking at what you interviewed, looking at what they told you, how can you tie some of that back to our studies, and is it consistent with what you've been learning about, or what ideas you've been writing about in your discussion boards and so forth. So really give this resultant data analysis a good understanding as you begin to work on that final project. Summary, conclusions, and recommendations. Summarize your findings from the interview in an organized manner and prepare conclusions based on the information that you obtained from your interview subject, as well as your previous work during the semester. Include conclusions on the effects of active citizen involvement within the government using your data as evidence. Your summary will be helpful in aiding other municipal officials moving forward. Include sample recommendations on challenges that you examined. So maybe whoever you're interviewing, maybe it's a police chief, and the challenges today of recruiting law enforcement officers, those are going to be important. And you can look at some data. Maybe they have been having significant issues in hiring. Nobody's applying for jobs, or whatever the case is. Or my experience has typically been when the economy is robust. A lot of people like the public sector or the private sector because the money's there. And there's some other, other benefits too. Typically, when things aren't going so well, then people might consider a public sector employment. But just really go back and think about some of the things we've learned, the whole idea of active citizen engagement and involvement in local government, and to what level. And again, you can ask your interviewee his or her thoughts on the level of citizen involvement. Is it a hindrance? Is it positive? Is it necessary? Is it unnecessary? Is it beneficial? Not beneficial? Things like that. Okay, so those are the kind of things you really start need to focus on. So again, I'm looking for not just your general understanding in your interview. You can ask your general questions, but I'll be looking for some ideas, some content that demonstrates your critical analysis and critical thinking, and tying some components together from our course room class into your interview discussion, so you can make that everyday connection. Okay. So the format, you can use this as your format. Maybe use it as your something to review as you get ready to submit your paper. But again, make sure you review these main elements as you prepare your final paper. Okay. Carefully review the grading rubric. So here are the categories. The critical elements are going to be summary, conclusions, and recommendations. Results of data analysis, milestone submissions, and incorporation of feedback. So here I'm just looking at whether or not you took some ideas of mine into consideration as you developed your final paper. Again, results and data analysis, constraints and benefits of the municipal officer's position. So, like we talked about, you can tie in constraints in the form of budgetary issues, fiscal problems, demographic changes, inability to hire people, whatever the case may be. And each of you guys are going to have something a little different because you're interviewing different types of people. Okay. Excuse me. So again, read through this carefully in terms of understanding what it is that you've been told in your interview and how you can apply that to some of our course content material. And that way you can connect what this guy's saying and his ability to provide local services. Obviously, if you're doing budgetary impacts, you're not going to be able to provide the services that you want. Again, the feedback, we've already talked about that. The other thing I want to make sure you understand is this research. Incorporate many scholarly, some scholarly, very few scholarly. We've already talked about this, but I will go through it again. And I'll make sure it's in writing. So in order to get a maximum number of points for research, you have to have many scholarly sources. Remember, your book is always a good one. That will be defined as 5 or more scholarly sources, all right? Some scholarly sources will be defined as 3 to 4, and then incorporates very few will be 1 to 2. All right, so make sure that you use the appropriate number of sources, which is going to be right here, right? 5 or more. You want to get the maximum number of points. Your textbooks is a good source. You can go back and look at some of the resources that you may have referenced previously in your milestone or your short papers and your discussion boards, and tie those sources into your paper if they apply. All right, so make sure you do that. And then writing. So in terms of writing, make sure it's good, make sure it's polished. Feel free to have a peer review. Somebody reads it for you, give it to your wife, a co-worker, say, read this, does it make sense? Does it flow okay? Are there different things I can do? Okay. So that's about it. I think it has to be, yes, 5 pages in length. All right, so right here, 5 pages. So make sure you give it your attention in terms of writing. So follow the guidelines. Again, 5 pages in length at least, and shoot for that 5 or more scholarly sources. You get maximum points. All right. If you have any questions about this, let me know. Thank you guys, and have a good weekend.